Hey, what's up guys, it's Bakes and thanks for joining me for another one of my random horror reviews. In today's episode we have a movie only from last year, so 2022. Here we have the film The Black Phone. Now if you've been on my channel before, you probably would have seen my top 10 list of my favourite horror movies of 2022, and a little bit of a spoiler alert if you haven't seen that list, this was my number 5, so to not dance around the elephant in the room, I did enjoy this movie. But in that video, I kind of only briefly spoke about each movie and what I liked most about them, so I'm excited to get into this one in a little bit more detail. I hadn't seen it since watching it in cinemas for the first time, but after picking it up on DVD, I watched it again a couple of nights ago, and as I said, I'm excited to talk about it in a little bit more depth. So before we get into my thoughts of The Black Phone, let's quickly get into the plot for this one. I don't think it specifically says, but my guess is this movie takes place in the early 80s. We follow our lead, a 13-year-old boy named Finney. He lives with his sister and his abusive father. Finney is a kid that is very much in his shell. He's very quiet, he gets picked on by bullies at school, doesn't stand up to his abusive father as much as he wants to. Meanwhile, in this town, kids are going missing, and the newspaper have labelled this man the Grabber, and this is him on the front. He's played by Ethan Hawke. And one day, Finney falls victim to the Grabber. He is held hostage in the Grabber's basement, and in the basement there is a phone up on the wall. It's not connected to anything. However, Finney starts receiving phone calls from the ghosts of the Grabber's previous victims, and they are trying to help Finney escape. And that's sort of our story there. I'm going to try and keep it brief, and let's get into my thoughts of The Black Phone from 2022. Now, I remember watching this movie for the first time in theatres, and it got to about the 20-25 minute mark of this movie, and I thought to myself, this very much feels like a Stephen King adaptation. You know, the vibes were there, it felt very Stephen King, and this might be me living under a rock, I'm not sure if this is general knowledge, but The Black Phone is based off a book written by Stephen King's son Joe Hill, which I've never read any of Joe Hill's work, but it feels very much Stephen King. So if Stephen King adaptations are something you enjoy, this would be very much up your alley, because as I said, it just bleeds Stephen King. The vibes are very much there, so if those sort of movies are your thing, I'm sure you're going to enjoy this one. And I guess to continue on from that point, the story is a major highlight in this movie. It's just so well written, one of the better stories of last year. It's nothing over the top, it's relatively simple, but so many elements in this one work, and it's adapted very well into a movie. As I said, I've never read the book, but the movie just flows so well with the story. And to continue on with that, I mentioned in my top 10 video, where this was my number 5, that I was surprised that this had a 100-minute runtime, because my prediction coming out of the theatre, watching it for the first time, I thought it was maybe an hour 20, hour and 25. As I said, 100-minute runtime, an hour and 40. It did not feel like that at all. Rewatching it this time, it didn't go by quite as fast. However, I'm not going to criticize that at all, because as I said, there was no real slow points. The story just flowed so well. I was super engaged still, and it didn't drag at any point. So again, this movie just flows so well with the story and the runtime. Now, to continue on and get into the acting for this one, the acting is also very great in this movie, and a lot of people will want to bring up Ethan Hawke as the Grabber. I mean, he's top bill, and I don't want to undermine his performance, because he is very good. Him as the Grabber is perfectly fine. However, the highlight for acting in this movie is our lead Finney, played by Mason Thames. I thought he did a fucking incredible job, easily in my top 10 performances from last year, and give him some credit, because as a child actor also, I've said this so many times, child actors can be very iffy. When they're bad, it's extremely noticeable, and when they're good, you just want to be like, whatever, they don't normally get major roles, but he leads this movie, and so confidently as well. I searched him up, and I was very surprised that he hasn't done much else besides this. If I was working in Hollywood and I was making a movie, I would have no hesitation casting him in a role that suits. He was fucking incredible in this movie. As I said, really holds his own. Just off this performance alone, I would say he's in the best child actors working in Hollywood at the moment by far. He was incredible. Getting into other characters, the sister, she wasn't as annoying this time around. First time watch, I found her character to be a little bit irritating, but this time around more tolerable. She's also a very good actor. That scene where she's getting beat by the father. Not to go into spoilers or into too much detail story-wise. That's so sad. It's very brutal. But she does a great job acting there. One thing that I've heard a lot of people talk about is the inclusion of the character Max. They feel like it's too comedic for this movie, it feels too out of place. However, I enjoy it because I feel like it gives you that comedic break from a movie that is honestly pretty bleak and pretty dark. So I do enjoy having Max in there as a little bit of a refresher. Each moment maybe isn't always the funniest, but a good inclusion overall. Now, before we get any deeper into this review, I just wanted to clear up a problem that I mentioned in my top 10 horror movies of 2022 list when I spoke about The Black Phone. I said in that video how the first half of the movie felt maybe a little bit disconnected or clunky for myself. Something felt a little bit out of order or rushed. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. However, rewatching it this time, I did not feel the same way at all. I just wanted to clear that up just in case you saw that video and was wondering if that is still an issue. As I mentioned before, the storytelling and the pacing for this one is just incredible. It's so well done, so it must have just been my mood that day, or I was overthinking something. I can't quite put my finger on it, as I said, but just in case you were wondering if I was still feeling the same way, not at all. But one thing that I did notice more watching the film this time is its coming-of-age elements. It's not your typical coming-of-age movie. You know, when you think of those types of movies, you think of Stand By Me, something like that. But this one is very much coming-of-age. We have our character Finney, who, as I said earlier, he is very much in his shell. He's too scared to stand up against his abusive father, against bullies. But a characteristic that he has is he's able to keep pushing on. And once he is kidnapped by the grabber and held in this basement, he's able to keep pushing on. And yes, he gets the help from the ghosts through the phone and everything. But the turnaround and the confidence and everything that he builds through this movie peaks at the climax. And it did such a great ending to this movie. And even after the climax of the movie and everything's all said and done and we sort of get the closing of this movie, it just shows the turnaround of his character so well, and that's something that stuck out even more to me watching the movie this time around, and I very much enjoyed it. Alright, so to wrap up my review of The Black Phone, I probably like this movie even more now. I'm not sure if it would have moved up my rating that much because my top 4 I very much enjoyed, but yeah, as I said, I probably like the movie even more this time. Just everything is so well done, the story is just so neat, well packed together. It doesn't feel slow at any points. It flows very nice, and especially for a movie that is almost a one location film, done so well. As I said, Ethan Hawke does a great job as the grabber, but again, I want to highlight Mason Thames. He does such a great job, and again, as a child actor, and like I mentioned before, this movie is almost one location, so a lot of the time he's by himself. He just does a great job, and again, with his character, the turnaround, the build of confidence, the coming-of-age elements that come through with his character, it's very satisfying and, gratifying to see in the end. I very much like this movie. Again, on its second time watch, I'm going to give The Black Phone an 8.5 out of 10. So, as I said, if you like Stephen King adaptation films, this movie is very much going to be up your alley because it has a lot of those characteristics. And well adapted again, is that the word? It's a good adaptation, but I very much like this movie. I'm sure if you guys haven't checked it out and you want to, I'm sure you guys are going to love it. But thank you for joining me again for one of my random horror reviews, guys. I'll see you for another video soon. Peace.